As I welcome you back to your morning devotion, a couple Joe right here on the Home Based Ministries Network. Good morning to Evangelist X of Friday, San Della Rosa, and all of yours, and to the Enoch family, Pastor Richardson, and all of yours, and all of those who are listening in. Today we are looking at chapter 8 in the book of Ezekiel, remembering what took place in chapter 7, that, all the world's power, military power, failed, and we had to just acknowledge God in all things and know that He was responsible for all things and He is responsible for all things. Recognize how He can render all these so called powers of this world powerless by His word. See that the events we experience are the word of old and that He is responsible for all occurrences, and He gives His reason why a lot of people, some ignorantly and some purposefully, give worship to the wrong powers and principalities, and God has enough of that. Alright? So the talk of rendering the world powerless by pestilence or sickness is not new. No, it isn't. It has already been spoken. Beloved, God is in charge. Know that. So verse 1 in chapter 8, the prophet and the elders of Judah are together in his house. Clearly, again, we outline that this is the Babylonian captivity, the southern kingdom, and Ezekiel has to have some kind of influence among his people for the elders to be present there. Verse 2, he states that the heavy influence of God was upon him, and the Lord appears before him and picks him up by the lock of his hair, taking him and putting him in a high position where he could see clearly how God is seeing Jerusalem. Verse 3, Ezekiel is shown what is described as the image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. The image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. Alright, this is in the temple in Jerusalem. What would this image, or rather, who is this image of jealousy in God's temple? Verse 4, Ezekiel again recognizes that it is God showing him these things, as he says the appearance was as his previous experience in the plain. Verse 5, God then speaks to him and tells him to lift up his eyes, looking to a northward direction, and in the gate at the entrance is one who clearly is not to be anywhere involved in God's work. Verse 6, God makes Ezekiel aware of what he calls abominations being carried out in the temple, committed by the house of Israel. These are the acts that can make him move far away from his place. If he thought that was all, God shows him again there are worse things even taking place again. Verse 7, God took Ezekiel to a doorway where when he looked into it, he saw a hole in the wall. Verse 8, Ezekiel is then he's then told by God to dig. And when he did, he came to a door. He passes one door and digs a hole which takes him to another door. Verse 9, God told him to go in and to take a look at what they are doing in there. God was showing Ezekiel how many things that doesn't belong there were comfortably in the temple, which he called the wicked abominations. Now keep in mind, this is the temple we are in and are being shown these things. Verse 10, not only that, but they were also overlooked by an ungodly presence also in the temple. Idols etched in the walls all around. Worship of all sorts of creatures taking place in the temple. Ezekiel describes what he sees in the temple as every form. Every form. They had idols of everything. He says every form of creeping thing and abominable beast. We too, believers in Christ, have to take a look into some of the small holes in our churches and dig and see what sort of things have crept in that are not of God. Things that we have given a place to. Idols and abominations, ungodly works, giving a seat to no other than the image of jealousy, which provoketh jealousy. A deep dig is required. We have to expose and destroy. God is looking on the churches to be without all forms of idolatry, images, and misleading leaders. God places his leaders in a position where they can see every entry point into the kingdom. Remember, Ezekiel was taken up. Every entrance to where also an ungodly presence has already begun to stand. These men who are lifted into these positions are to be constantly aware, you pastors, and are to constantly expose any infiltrations of God's temple, you evangelists. This way, any diversion from the truth will be recognized and dealt with. God placed Ezekiel between the heaven and the earth. He suspended him between the two realms to give him vision beyond the natural, so he can see what was taking place. This was not by choice, but was by God's doing. What I'm telling you is that it is God who puts those he chooses in the positions to see beyond the natural. But more so, you believers, you are right now at the door, seeing this that the scriptures have placed you at a point of entrance. So do a little digging and see what can be exposed. You see, you may be in a position or situation where either something or someone may just present itself to you. So see what's behind what's in front of you before you begin to idolize it. The enemy is very crafty. God is giving us a warning to see what's behind some of the things that are coming into our faces, and avoid, if you have to avoid, and abstain where you have to abstain, cut off who you have to cut off, and I will say no more. I'll see you guys tomorrow. This is Pastor Solomon.